Upon returning from his trip, a businessman expected to reunite with his daughter and the peace of home. But the silence he found was colder than absence. It was the echo of something terribly wrong. In the back of the house, he saw the impossible. His daughter rummaging through the trash, hungry and frightened. If this beautiful story of overcoming adversity and love interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. Continuing. Edward Mendoza observed the Kensington mansion through the car window as the driver passed through the property's gates. The immaculate gardens and imposing facade contrasted with the anxiety growing in his chest. 3 months away from home, traveling through the country's major cities to expand his luxury hotel chain, now seemed like an eternity. The longing for Sophia, his 7-year-old daughter, became almost physical. "We've arrived, sir," announced Sebastian, his driver and longest-serving employee, parking near the main entrance. Edward stepped out of the car, taking a deep breath of the Los Angeles afternoon air. The silence that hung over the property was disconcerting. Usually, Sophia would run to the entrance as soon as she heard the car engine, but today there was no sign of her. "Sophia must be in her room playing," he commented to himself, trying to push away the uncomfortable feeling that was beginning to settle in. He crossed the entrance hall, noticing the emptiness that seemed to occupy every corner of the house. No children's music, no laughter, no sound of the cartoons Sophia loved to watch on Sunday afternoons. Only the echo of his own footsteps on the marble floor. "Helen, Sophia," he called, leaving his document brief on the coffee table. Moments later, Helen Vance, his wife of just over a year, appeared at the top of the staircase. Elegant as ever, she wore a red dress that highlighted her perfect silhouette and impeccably styled dark hair. "Edward, darling, it's good to have you back," she said, descending the steps with studied grace. "How was the trip? Did you manage to close the deals in Miami?" He nodded distractedly as he accepted the superficial kiss she placed on his lips. "Where's Sophia?" "Resting in her room," Helen replied, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist. She had a busy day at school. You know how children get exhausted. Something in Helen's tone made Edward frown. In 3 years of living together, first as his girlfriend and then as his wife, he had learned to detect the subtleties in her speech. There was a dissonant note, something that didn't match the maternal concern she was trying to show. "I'll go see her," he decided, heading towards the stairs. "I don't think that's a good idea," Helen interrupted him, touching his arm. "She just fell asleep. Why don't you rest a bit? You must be tired from the trip. I've prepared your favorite whiskey in the study." Edward hesitated. The offer was tempting after the long flight from Miami to Los Angeles, but the desire to see his daughter was stronger. Ever since Sophia's mother, Marianne, had passed away in a tragic accident when the girl was only 3 years old, he had promised never to put his daughter second. "I appreciate it. But I need to see my daughter first," he replied firmly, gently disengaging himself. He climbed the stairs with determined steps, feeling Helen's gaze piercing his back. The hallway leading to Sophia's room seemed strangely silent. No sound of breathing, no movement. He stopped before the door decorated with his daughter's name in colorful letters and knocked lightly. "Sophia?" "Daddy's home." No answer. He turned the doorknob and entered. The room was immaculate. Too immaculate. The toys, normally scattered across the rug in a creative mess, were organized on the shelves like a store display. The bed was perfectly made, without a single wrinkle in the pink sheets. The teddy bears lined up against the headboard seemed to watch him with empty eyes. There was no sign of Sophia's favorite doll, the one she never let out of reach when she slept. "Sophia?" he called again, checking the bathroom and closet. Nothing. He hurried downstairs, finding Helen in the living room, distractedly flipping through a decor magazine. "Where is Sophia?" he asked without preamble. "Her room is empty." Helen looked up, displaying an expression of surprise. "What do you mean empty? She must be there. I put her to sleep less than an hour ago." "She's not," he insisted, feeling his concern quickly turn into panic. "Sophia is not in her room." "Maybe she went to play in the garden," Helen suggested, getting up with a sigh. "You know how she is. She doesn't stay in one place for long." Edward quickly headed to the back door that led to the garden. The pool, the custom-built playground he had commissioned for Sophia's birthday, the tree house, all empty. He called his daughter's name repeatedly. his voice echoing among the well-tended trees. It was then that he heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible, coming from the utility area near the kitchen. He followed the noise, going around the house to the part where the staff quarters and the waste disposal area were located. What he saw there chilled his blood. Sophia, his little princess, was kneeling beside the trash cans, her small, dirty hands rummaging through plastic bags. Her body, once vibrant and full of energy, seemed to have withered. The dress, which Edward recognized as the same one she wore in their last video call 5 days ago, was stained and crumpled. Her brown hair, normally shiny and well-combed, hung in tangled strands around her pale face. "Sophia," he called, his voice trembling with shock. The girl lifted her face, and the impact was devastating. Her eyes, once lively and curious like her mother's, were dull and sunken, surrounded by dark circles. Her cheeks, once plump, had disappeared, leaving her face angular and aged. Upon recognizing her father, silent tears streamed down her dirty face. Edward rushed to her, falling to his knees beside her. He noticed Sophia trying to hide something behind her back. "What do you have there, princess?" he asked with all the gentleness he could muster, trying to control the tremor in his voice. Sophia hesitated, fear evident in her eyes, before showing him a piece of stale bread she had found among the scraps. "I was hungry, Daddy," she whispered, so low he could barely hear. "I'm sorry. I know I wasn't supposed to come here. I didn't want to be punished again." Edward felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Carefully, he took his daughter in his arms, noticing how light she was, almost ethereal. Sophia shivered at his touch, as if expecting a reprimand. "Punished? Who punished you, my love?" The girl lowered her eyes, biting her lower lip. "I can't say. She said you'll send me away if I complain." "That you'll be angry with me." "Who said that, Sophia?" But she only buried her face in her father's chest, trembling like a leaf. "I'm scared of her, Daddy." Edward carried Sophia in his arms to the kitchen, away from Helen's eyes. The cook, Mrs. Jenkins, who had worked for the family for over a decade, dropped the wooden spoon she was holding when she saw the girl's condition. "My goodness, what happened to our girl?" the elderly woman exclaimed, approaching quickly. "Jenkins, please prepare something light for Sophia to eat, and call Dr. Roderick immediately," Edward requested, seating his daughter in one of the kitchen chairs. The cook nodded, moving quickly to prepare homemade soup while dialing the family doctor's number on her cell phone. Edward knelt before his daughter, holding her cold little hands. "Sophia, I want you to tell me everything that happened while I was away. No one will scold you, I promise. You are safe now." The girl looked towards the kitchen door as if fearing someone might appear at any moment. Only then did Edward notice something that perplexed him. There was a new padlock on the door connecting the kitchen to the rest of the house. "Why is there a padlock here, Jenkins?" he asked, anger beginning to bubble in his chest. The cook lowered her eyes, visibly embarrassed. "Mrs. Vance had it installed 2 weeks ago. She said it was to control access to food between meals. I tried to argue, sir, but—" Edward took a deep breath, trying to remain calm in front of Sophia. He turned his attention back to his daughter, who was now eagerly sipping the broth Mrs. Jenkins had placed before her. "Slowly, my love," he instructed, stroking the girl's tangled hair. "There's plenty more if you want." Between spoonfuls, Sophia began to speak, first in broken whispers, then with more confidence as she realized her father was truly listening. "After you traveled, Aunt Helen changed," she explained, using the term she used to refer to her stepmother. "She said I was too spoiled, that I needed to learn discipline." Edward kept his expression neutral, despite his growing fury. "And what did she do?" "At first, she just told me to stay in my room. Then, she started locking the door. She said I could only leave for meals, but I had to eat everything very quickly. If I took too long—" Sophia swallowed hard. "If I took too long, she said I didn't deserve food, that I was lazy and ungrateful." Mrs. Jenkins let out a sob as she stirred the soup, turning her back to hide her tears. Edward felt a lump in his throat but encouraged Sophia to continue. "She took away my coloring books, my pencils, said it was a privilege, not a right. She locked the TV in my room. She made me go without dinner if I spoke loudly or cried." The girl paused, drinking some water. Her voice came out even softer when she continued. Last week, Aunt Helen told me that Mom died because of me, that she got stressed with me, and that's why her heart stopped. She said the same thing could happen to you if I told that you would suffer like Mom. Edward could no longer contain his emotion. He hugged his daughter tightly, letting his own tears wet her hair. "Sophia, listen." "Carefully," he said, pulling back to look her in the eyes. "Your mother had a heart condition that no one knew about. It wasn't your fault, never was. She loved you more than anything in this world, and I love you too more than anything." The sound of the doorbell interrupted the moment. Seconds later, Sebastian entered the kitchen accompanied by Dr. Roderick Fisher, the family's trusted doctor and Edward's personal friend since college. "She's here, Doctor," Sebastian said, indicating Sophia with a worried glance. The doctor approached quickly, placing his briefcase on the table. "Edward, what happened?" "Sebastian told me it was an emergency." "Examine Sophia, please," Edward asked, stepping back to give the doctor space. "I didn't know who else to turn to." While Dr. Roderick carefully examined the girl, Edward pulled Sebastian aside. "I want you to watch Helen. Don't let her leave the house or make any calls. If she asks about Sophia, tell her she's with me in the study." The driver nodded, loyalty evident in his firm gaze. "Consider it done, boss. May I ask what's going on?" "Helen?" Edward hesitated, looking at his daughter, who was now opening her mouth for the doctor to check her throat. "She mistreated Sophia while I was away. I need to understand the extent of what happened before making any decisions." Sebastian frowned, an expression of indignation spreading across his face. "I always mistrusted that woman, sir. Too calculating for my taste." Edward silently agreed. Helen had entered his life at a moment of deep vulnerability, 2 years after Marianne's passing. Beautiful, intelligent and seemingly affectionate towards Sophia, she had seemed like the answer to the loneliness that consumed him. Now he saw that he had made the worst mistake of his life. Dr. Roderick approached with a grave expression. "Edward, we need to talk." They moved away a bit, while Mrs. Jenkins finished feeding Sophia some homemade pudding for dessert. "Sophia is significantly malnourished," the doctor informed him in a low voice. "She shows signs of dehydration, anemia, and, what worries me most, severe anxiety for a child of her age." Edward felt his blood run cold. "How serious is this?" "She needs immediate hospital care," Roderick replied bluntly. "I'm taking you to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I have some colleagues in pediatrics who can help us without much fuss, but—" He hesitated. "Edward, this is a clear case of child abuse. I'll need to document everything and notify the authorities." "Do whatever is necessary," Edward agreed. "Just help me protect her." At that moment, a voice cut through the kitchen air like a sharp blade. "What is going on here?" Helen stood at the door, her gaze alternating between Sophia, who visibly flinched at the sight of her, and the group of adults gathered. Her face, normally a mask of serenity, now displayed a mixture of irritation and alarm. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" she asked with false sweetness. "You should be resting, dear. Come, let's go back to your room." Before the girl could move, Edward placed himself between them. "She's not going anywhere with you, Helen." "What are you talking about?" Helen forced a laugh, but her eyes remained cold. Sophia is obviously confused and tired. "Look at her, she's dirty and disheveled. Let me take care of it." "As you took care of her for the past 3 months?" Edward questioned, his voice low and dangerous. "Locking her in her room? Depriving her of food? Blaming her for her own mother's death?" A flicker of panic crossed Helen's face before she recomposed her expression. "I don't know what you're talking about. Sophia has always had a tendency to exaggerate, you know that. She probably made up these stories because she's angry with me for setting some boundaries." Dr. Roderick stepped forward. "Madam, as a doctor, I can assure you that Sophia's physical state is not the result of made-up stories. She shows clear signs of mistreatment and neglect." Helen looked around, noticing the accusing glances. Her posture shifted, abandoning the facade of maternal concern. "Are you really going to believe a spoiled child and these envious employees, Edward?" she hissed, crossing her arms. "After everything I've done for you and for her, I sacrificed my career, my dreams, to be a good wife and mother." "Sebastian," Edward called without taking his eyes off Helen. "Take Sophia and Dr. Roderick to the car, please." "You go ahead. I'll meet you there." As Sebastian picked up Sophia, the girl clung to the driver's neck, hiding her face so as not to see her stepmother. Mrs. Jenkins quickly separated some fruits and crackers, putting them in a bag for the trip, murmuring words of comfort to the child. When they were alone in the kitchen, Edward faced Helen, seeing for the first time the real person behind the facade. "I want a divorce," Edward declared, keeping his voice controlled despite the rage boiling in his veins. "And you will leave this house today." Helen laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Divorce? Don't be ridiculous, Edward. You have no proof of anything. It's your word against mine. And in case you've forgotten, half of all this is rightfully mine." Edward stood firm, though his heart beat furiously against his chest. "I have all the proof I need in my daughter's condition. And as for the assets, perhaps you should review our prenuptial agreement. My lawyer was very specific about the clauses regarding mistreatment of family members." Helen's confident expression wavered for an instant. "No judge will believe a disturbed child. Sophia has always had emotional problems since her mother's death. Everyone knows that. I can easily claim she did this to herself to get your attention." "Is that so?" Edward walked to the kitchen door, pointing to the padlock. "And this, did Sophia install it? And the marks on her body, were they also self-inflicted?" Helen straightened her shoulders, changing tactics. "I was just trying to impose discipline." "The girl was out of control, Edward. You're never here to see how she really behaves. Always working, always traveling. What kind of father does that? Maybe you should worry about your own failures as a father before judging me as a stepmother." The words hit Edward like poisoned darts, finding the guilt he always carried for his frequent absences. But he refused to be manipulated. "I trusted you, Helen. I entrusted my daughter, the greatest treasure of my life, to you, and you—" He took a deep breath, controlling his emotion. "You deliberately hurt her. That is unforgivable. Unforgivable." Helen laughed again, now with bitterness. "I don't need your forgiveness, Edward. I need what is owed to me. Do you think I would put up with being that spoiled brat stepmother if it weren't for the money? For the status of being the wife of Edward Mendoza, the great hotel magnate?" The raw confession shocked Edward, although part of him had always suspected Helen's true motivations. "It was never about us, was it? It was always about what you could get." "Don't be naive," Helen shrugged, completely dropping her facade. "You were alone, vulnerable and rich, the perfect package. And that girl was just an obstacle to be overcome. I knew from the start that she was the way to your heart. And to your bank account." Edward felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean by that?" "Thus, Sophia is your only heir, isn't she? The apple of your eye?" Helen smiled, a predatory smile he had never seen before. "How do you think it would be if something happened to her? If she disappeared for a few days, perhaps? A traumatized child, fleeing the house where she felt mistreated by her absent father." Edward took a step forward, his anger turning into something colder and more dangerous. "Are you threatening me, Helen?" "I'm just stating facts," she replied calmly. "Children disappear all the time, especially rich children from influential families." The veiled threat was the last straw. Edward pulled his phone from his pocket. "I'm calling the police right now." Helen laughed. "And say what?" "That your evil wife didn't feed your daughter properly. Please, it will be my word against yours. And I'm sure the tabloids will love the story of the absent billionaire trying to blame his wife for his own negligence." "Perhaps you're right," Edward said, surprising her. "Perhaps it is your word against mine. But what about against the security cameras I installed throughout the house before I traveled?" Helen's face visibly paled. "You're bluffing. You never mentioned cameras." "Why would I mention them? They were just a precaution." Edward watched the panic grow in her eyes. "And now it seems it was the smartest decision I've ever made." He was, in fact, bluffing. There were no cameras. But Helen didn't need to know that. The fear in her eyes confirmed everything Edward suspected. There was much more he still didn't know. "You have an hour to pack your things and leave," he declared coldly. "Sebastian will return to pick you up. If you're still here, the police will escort you." Without waiting for a response, Edward left the kitchen and headed to his study. He needed to act fast. Helen was dangerous, much more than he had imagined. He dialed the number of Kyle Rogers, his lawyer and longtime friend. "Kyle? It's me, Edward. I need your help immediately. It's about Sophia and my marriage." As he briefly explained the situation, Edward opened the safe built into the wall behind a painting. From inside, he retrieved the prenuptial agreement he had signed with Helen, mentally reviewing the clauses, that could protect Sophia and his assets. "I understand," Kyle said on the other end of the line. "I'm going to Cedars Sinai right now." "And Edward?" "I'll contact Juvenile Court and request an emergency protective order. Helen won't be able to approach Sophia until everything is clarified." "Thank you, friend." Edward felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Don't thank me yet. We have a long road ahead. Helen won't give up easily." Edward hung up, putting the document in the inner pocket of his jacket. As he turned to leave, he found Helen standing at the study door, watching him with narrowed eyes. "So this is how it ends?" she asked, her voice laden with contempt. "Do you really think you can get rid of me so easily?" "There's nothing easy about this, Helen," Edward replied, keeping his distance. "But it's over. You yourself just admitted you never cared about Sophia or me. It was all about money." "So what?" Helen shrugged. "It's always about money, Edward. Your first marriage may have been for love, but this world isn't made of fairy tales. People like me do what's necessary to survive. Mistreating an innocent child is doing what's necessary." Edward questioned, incredulous. "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who wasn't born with a silver spoon in their mouth like you," Helen retorted, bitter. "Do you know how many doors opened for me when I became Mrs. Mendoza? How many opportunities came out of nowhere? This is the real world, Edward. People use people." Something in Helen's calculating coldness deeply disturbed him. It was as if he was finally seeing beyond the mask, and what he found there was a frightening emptiness. "You need help, Helen," he said sincerely. "The kind of help I can't offer. But what I won't allow is for you to continue hurting my daughter." Edward's cell phone vibrated. A message from Sebastian. "Dr. Roderick and Sophia arrived safely at the hospital. I'm coming back to pick you up." "Your driver isn't taking me anywhere," Helen declared, noticing Edward's relieved expression as he read the message. "I'm staying right here in this house that is also mine." Edward put his phone away, facing her with determination. "You have a choice, Helen. Leave now with dignity, or wait for the police and reporters who, I'm sure, will love the story of the socialite who mistreated her stepdaughter." Helen's face contorted into an expression of hatred. "You'll regret this, Edward. No one humiliates me and gets away with it." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," she replied, turning her back and walking away with firm steps. Edward took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The situation was far from resolved, but his priority now was Sophia. He picked up the phone again, this time dialing Martha, his personal assistant. "Martha, I need you to activate our security team immediately. I want the mansion monitored 24 hours a day. And contact Detective Mark Adams. I need him to investigate Helen Vance's past, my wife. Everything from birth until now. Something is very wrong, and I need to find out what it is before it's too late." While waiting for Sebastian, Edward couldn't stop thinking about what Helen had said about Sophia disappearing. It didn't seem like an impulsive threat, but something carefully considered. Could Helen have already planned something against Sophia? The idea chilled his blood. The sound of the doorbell interrupted his dark thoughts. Through the study window, he saw Sebastian's car parked at the entrance. It was time to go meet his daughter. Cedars Sinai Medical Center, in the Kensington neighborhood of Los Angeles, exuded the familiar atmosphere of discreet efficiency that Edward had always associated with elite institutions. As he walked through silent corridors, guided by a compassionate-looking nurse, he tried to organize the thoughts that crowded his mind. "Your daughter is here." "Mr. Mendoza," the nurse informed him, stopping before a door with a small glass window. "Dr. Roderick requested a private wing to ensure discretion. The child psychologist, Dr. Beatrice Seneca, is already with them." Edward nodded his thanks and silently entered the room. Sophia was lying in the hospital bed, looking even smaller and more fragile among the white sheets. A young woman with curly hair sitting beside her smiled as he entered. "Daddy." Sophia tried to sit up but was gently restrained by Dr. Roderick. "Calm down, princess," the doctor said. "Remember what we talked about resting." Edward quickly approached, leaning in to kiss his daughter's forehead. "I'm here now, my love. I'm not going anywhere." Dr. Roderick made a discreet gesture indicating they needed to talk. The woman beside Sophia stood up. "Sophia, I'm going to let you talk with your dad for a bit, while Dr. Roderick and I talk outside, okay?" she said in a calm voice. "I'm Dr. Beatrice, remember? We'll be right back." Sophia nodded, still clinging to her father's hand. Edward noticed her face had been cleaned and her hair combed. Someone had changed her dirty clothes for colorful hospital pajamas. "You'll come back soon, won't you, Daddy?" she asked in a small voice. "I promise. I'll just talk to the doctor at the door and then I'll come back to be with you." Reluctantly, Sophia let go of his hand. Edward joined the two professionals in the hallway, leaving the door ajar so he could observe his daughter. "Edward, this is Dr. Beatrice Seneca, a psychologist specializing in child trauma," Dr. Roderick introduced. "I called her as soon as we arrived, given the complexity of the situation." Edward shook the psychologist's hand, noting her serious expression despite her gentle smile. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Doctor." "Sophia is a very brave girl," Beatrice commented. "We managed to talk a bit while they were doing the initial exams. She's still very scared and confused, but I've already obtained some important information." Dr. Roderick consulted the clipboard he was holding. "Physically, we confirmed moderate malnutrition, iron deficiency, anemia, and signs of dehydration. There are some bruises on her arms and legs in different stages of healing, suggesting the mistreatment has been going on for weeks." Edward closed his eyes for a moment, fighting against the wave of guilt and anger that threatened to overwhelm him. "And psychologically," Dr. Beatrice sighed. "Sophia shows clear signs of psychological trauma. Fear of abandonment, food insecurity, separation anxiety. She mentioned several times that she is afraid to speak because she will be punished. The stepmother clearly used quite sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques." "What kind of techniques?" Edward asked, feeling his stomach churn. "Isolation, deprivation of basic needs, threats, blaming," the psychologist enumerated. "But the most worrying was the use of her biological mother's memory as an instrument of control. Sophia sincerely believes she caused Marianne's death, and that she can cause yours too." Edward swallowed hard, anger growing like a storm in his chest. How could someone do that to a child? "We have already contacted Child Protective Services," Dr. Roderick informed him. "They will send a representative tomorrow to document the case. We have also prepared a detailed medical report that can be used as legal evidence." Dr. Beatrice placed a hand on Edward's arm. "Sophia mentioned something about the stepmother planning to take her somewhere. Do you know anything about that?" Edward felt a shiver. Helen hinted at something about Sophia disappearing for a few days. "I thought it was just an empty threat in the heat of the argument, but now—" "We need to take this seriously," the psychologist affirmed. "I strongly recommend that you request a protective order immediately." "It's already being arranged," Edward assured her. "My lawyer is on his way." As if invoked by the conversation, Kyle Rogers appeared at the end of the hallway, walking briskly towards them. Tall, with graying hair and an elegant demeanor, the lawyer carried a leather brief under his arm and a determined expression on his face. "Edward," he greeted with a firm handshake. "I came as soon as I could. We've already filed the urgent protective order request. The duty judge should review it in the next few hours." After the introductions, the group re-entered the room. Sophia had fallen asleep, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. Edward sat beside the bed, holding his daughter's small, fragile hand. "What happens now?" he asked in a low voice so as not to wake her. Kyle opened his brief, taking out some documents. "Legally, we have several fronts. First, the contentious divorce proceedings, which I've already initiated based on the prenup. Second, the criminal action against Helen for mistreatment and psychological abuse. Third, the protective order to prevent her from approaching Sophia." "And what about custody?" Edward asked, apprehensive. "You are the biological father, Edward. Unless Helen tries to claim you were negligent for not noticing the abuse, which would be difficult to prove considering your constant business trips. Custody shouldn't be a problem." Dr. Beatrice gently intervened. "Actually, it would be important to address that aspect. Sophia mentioned that the stepmother frequently used your absences as an argument to justify the punishments." Edward felt the weight of guilt again. "I should have noticed sooner. I should have been more present." "Self-blame doesn't help right now," Dr. Roderick stated firmly. "The important thing is how you're going to act from now on." Kyle checked his watch. "I have a source at the specialized police station. We can file the police report today based on the medical report. The sooner we start building the case, the better." "Do whatever is necessary," Edward agreed, without taking his eyes off his sleeping daughter. "I just want to ensure Helen never gets near Sophia again." There's another issue, Kyle added, hesitating. We need to consider the possibility of media exposure. You're a public figure, Edward. This case will inevitably attract attention. Edward hadn't thought about that. As the owner of one of the largest hotel chains in the country, his name frequently appeared in business magazines and social columns. A scandal involving his wife and accusations of child abuse would be a feast for the sensationalist press. The priority is to protect Sophia, he declared firmly. If that means facing the press, so be it. I can help with that, Dr. Beatrice offered. I have experience guiding high-profile families in delicate situations like this. The most important thing is to create a safe and stable environment for Sophia in the coming days. A buzz from Edward's cell phone interrupted the conversation. It was a message from Sebastian. Urgent, Mrs. Vance is no longer at the mansion. She left before I arrived, took several suitcases and jewelry from the safe. What should I do? Edward showed the message to Kyle, who immediately pulled out his own phone. I'm calling my police contacts right now. If she's fleeing, that only confirms her guilt. As the lawyer left to make the call, Edward felt Sophia squeeze his hand. She had woken up and was watching him with frightened eyes. Is she coming back, Daddy? She asked in a whisper. Aunt Helen said she would always come back, no matter what. Edward stroked his daughter's hair, trying to convey a security he didn't fully feel. No, my love. She won't hurt you anymore. I promise. Sophia seemed to relax a little, but there were still shadows of fear in her eyes. Can I tell you a secret, Daddy? Something I didn't tell the doctor. Of course you can, Princess, anything. The girl looked around as if checking if they were truly alone, then spoke in a very low voice. Aunt Helen has a friend who comes to pick her up sometimes. A lady with red hair who speaks funny. They talk about a plan, about taking me far away. I heard them when they pretended I was asleep. Edward felt a chill. Do you know this friend's name? Sophia frowned, concentrating. I think it's Tati. Or Catty. She scared me. She looked at me like I was a problem to solve. At that moment, Kyle returned to the room, accompanied by Dr. Roderick. Sensing the tension, they approached cautiously. Any news? The doctor asked. Edward made a discreet gesture, indicating they would talk outside the room. After promising Sophia he would be back in minutes, he joined the two men in the hallway. Sophia just told me about a woman, apparently a friend of Helen's, who was involved in plans to take Sophia far away, he quickly explained. Red-haired with a foreign accent. Name similar to Tati or Catty, Kyle frowned. This changes everything. If there's a second person involved, we might be talking about a more elaborate scheme. What do you think? Edward asked, anxious. I'm thinking of two possibilities, Kyle replied, thoughtful. Either it's a kidnapping plot aiming for extortion, which would be plausible considering your financial condition, or? Edward pressed when the lawyer hesitated. Or Helen was planning to fake an abandonment or something worse, to incriminate you and take control of your assets as Sophia's legal guardian. Edward paled. Do you think she would be capable of that? Based on what we've seen so far, Dr. Roderick intervened, we cannot rule out any possibility. The level of psychological calculation demonstrated in Sophia's treatment suggests an extremely manipulative personality. At that instant, Edward's cell phone vibrated again. This time it was a message from Detective Mark Adams. Preliminary info on HV identity. Possibly false. The real Helen Vance died 8 years ago. I'm tracking leads on her true identity. Recommend extreme caution. Edward felt his blood run cold in his veins. Who, after all, was the woman he had married? The makeshift meeting room at the hospital had transformed into an operations center. Edward, Kyle, Dr. Roderick, Dr. Beatrice, and the newly arrived Detective Mark Adams were gathered around a round table, analyzing documents and exchanging information in low voices. Let's recap what we know so far, Mark proposed, a middle-aged man with keen eyes that denoted years of police experience. Before opening his own investigation agency, he had been a federal agent specializing in financial crimes. The woman we knew as Helen Vance apparently assumed the identity of a deceased person. How is that possible? Edward questioned, still trying to process the magnitude of the situation. More common than you imagine, Mark replied. Someone with access to a deceased person's documents can create a seemingly solid identity. The real Helen Vance was a young woman from Austin, Texas, who died in a car accident 8 years ago. No close family, no major social connections. The perfect profile to be adopted. And what about the background checks we did before the wedding? Kyle asked. Impeccable, of course. Marketing degree from UCLA. Experience in advertising firms, excellent references, all fabricated with attention to detail. She knew you would do a basic check, the detective explained, addressing Edward. Edward ran a hand through his hair, trying to assimilate the magnitude of the deception. So I married a complete stranger. We've made some progress in identifying her real self, Mark continued, opening a folder. Through facial recognition, we cross-referenced Helen's image with international databases. We found a partial match with a certain Katerina Volkov, a Russian citizen with a record at Interpol for marital fraud in at least 3 countries, Italy, France, and Argentina. Marital fraud? Edward repeated. It's a sophisticated scheme, Kyle explained. The person approaches someone wealthy, usually emotionally vulnerable, marries them and then disappears with a good portion of their assets. Or in more elaborate cases, manipulates the situation to gain total control over the assets. Like what would happen if something happened to me and she became Sophia's guardian, Edward concluded, feeling a shiver run down his spine. Exactly, Mark confirmed. And Sophia's mention of a red-haired accomplice with a foreign accent corroborates this theory. Normally these operations are not individual, but involve organized criminal networks. Dr. Beatrice, who had remained silent until then, leaned forward. From a psychological point of view, this explains a lot. The type of psychological manipulation Sophia suffered is not common in typical cases of mistreatment. There's a calculation, a methodical coldness that suggests training or at the very least prior experience. Do you think she's done this before? With other children? Edward asked, horrified by the possibility. It's a hypothesis we need to investigate, Mark replied. If this woman really is Katerina Volkov, there's evidence of a pattern. She tends to target wealthy men with young children, especially widowers or divorcees. After gaining the target's trust, she begins to isolate the child, creating a dynamic of dependence and fear. What would be the ultimate goal? Kidnapping for extortion? Dr. Roderick asked. Possibly, the detective considered. But based on what we know so far, and the comments she made to Edward, it seems more likely that the plan was to create a situation where Edward appeared to be a negligent or abusive father, allowing her to gain custody of Sophia and, consequently, control over the assets intended for the girl. Edward felt his stomach churn. How could I have been so blind? People like her are experts in manipulation, Dr. Beatrice consoled. They identify emotional vulnerabilities and exploit them. In your case, an overwhelmed man dealing with the loss of his wife and the pressures of raising a daughter alone while managing a business empire. You were the perfect target. A light knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Sebastian entered discreetly, gesturing to Edward. Sir, forgive the interruption, but I think we need to talk privately. Edward excused himself and went into the hallway with the driver. What happened, Sebastian? Remember that car Mrs. Vance borrowed from her friend a few weeks ago? The red BMW? Edward nodded. Helen had mentioned that a friend was traveling and had left the car in her care. Well, this afternoon when I went back to check the mansion, I noticed something strange about it. It seemed to have a device attached under the dashboard. My nephew works with electronics and said it could be a recorder. A recorder? In the car? Ah, yes, sir. And there's more. We managed to access it. There are several recorded conversations. Mrs. Vance talking to another woman, planning... Sebastian hesitated. Planning to make little Sophia disappear. Edward felt his legs weaken. You have these recordings? Ah, yes, sir. They're here. Sebastian showed a small USB storage device. There are several conversations in Portuguese, and some in another language that sounds like Russian or something. Russian, Edward repeated, remembering the information about Katerina Volkov. Sebastian, you just gave us the proof we needed. They quickly returned to the room where Edward explained the discovery. Mark immediately connected the device to his laptop, and the group listened in silence to the recordings. Helen's, or Katerina's, voice was cold and calculating as she discussed with another woman, identified as Tatiana, the details of a plan to make Sophia disappear for a few days, create evidence of negligence against Edward, and then reappear as the heroine who found the girl. "The child is the quickest way to the money," Helen said in one of the recordings. "When we have custody of her, we'll have access to everything. The trust fund, the shares, the properties. Mendoza put practically everything in her name after his first wife's death. What if he resists?" asked the other voice, laden with a strong Slavic accent. "He won't resist if he believes he can lose her forever," Helen replied with a coldness that made Edward shiver. "Besides, I'm preparing a plan B. I've been monitoring his medication. If necessary, we can make it look like a collapse due to stress. No one would question it considering the family tragedy we'd be facing." Edward paled. He took medication for high blood pressure, controlled for years. Was this what Helen was referring to? "And the girl?" Tatiana asked. "She already talks too much. After we get what we need, she might suffer a tragic accident," Helen replied with a dry laugh. "I'll be the grieving widow and mother. No one will question my right to the Mendoza empire." The recording ended, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Edward felt nauseous, the reality of the threat hanging over his daughter finally hitting him with full force. Kyle was the first to speak. "This changes everything. We're no longer just talking about mistreatment or marital fraud. We're dealing with conspiracy to kidnap, and potentially something much worse." "We need to act immediately," Mark agreed. "I'll send these recordings to my contacts at the FBI. Considering the international component and the possible link to Russian organized crime, they will have jurisdiction." "What about Sophia's safety?" Edward asked, concern evident in his voice. "I suggest transferring her to a safe location as soon as possible," the detective recommended. "If these women are who we believe them to be, they have resources and connections. A hospital, even a high-security one like this, is too exposed." Dr. Roderick nodded. "Clinically, Sophia could be discharged tomorrow. The tests showed no complications requiring prolonged hospitalization." "I can arrange a safe house," Kyle offered. "I have a property on the Southern California coast, on Catalina Island, registered under a holding company with no direct link to me or Edward. No one would make the connection." "Excellent idea," Mark approved. "We'll need enhanced security and limited communication." As the group discussed the logistical details, Edward felt torn between the anger boiling inside him and the fear for Sophia's safety. How to explain to a 7-year-old that they needed to hide? How to protect her not only physically, but emotionally from this new trauma? "May I speak with you for a moment?" Dr. Beatrice interrupted, sensing Edward's anguish. "I understand the security concerns, but we need to think about Sophia's psychological well-being. She has already gone through significant trauma. An abrupt change, being pulled from the hospital to an unknown place, can intensify her fear and anxiety." "What is your suggestion, Doctor?" Edward asked. "Let's prepare her gradually. Explain that you two are going on a special trip, just the two of you, to a beautiful place where she can recover. Present it as something positive, not as an escape. And most importantly, be present. Sophia needs to feel that she can trust you to protect her." Edward nodded, grateful for the guidance. "I agree. And I would like you to accompany us if possible. Sophia seems to trust you, and I need to learn how to help her overcome all this." Beatrice smiled gently. "It would be an honor to accompany you, Mr. Mendoza. Sophia is an extraordinary child, with impressive resilience. With the right support, she can overcome this trauma." "It's decided then," Kyle concluded. "Tomorrow we'll transfer Sophia to Catalina Island. Mark will continue the investigation here, in coordination with the authorities. We'll maintain minimal contact, only through secure channels." As the group finalized the details, Edward felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. For years he had delegated part of Sophia's care to nannies, staff, and tragically to Helen, while dedicating himself to expanding his businesses. Now he understood that no business success justified the lost time with his daughter, the chance to protect her personally. "If you'll excuse me," he said, standing up, "I need to be with my daughter now." Upon returning to Sophia's room, he found her awake, drawing in a notepad the nurse had provided. Seeing him, her face lit up with a hesitant smile, the first genuine one since his return. "Look, Daddy, I drew us," she said, showing a simple drawing of 2 figures holding hands, under a big yellow sun. Edward felt tears welling up in the corners of his eyes. "It's beautiful, Princess. Can I keep it?" Sophia nodded, proud, handing him the drawing. "You look sad, Daddy. Did Aunt Helen do something bad to you too?" Their question, so innocent and yet so profound, pierced Edward's heart like an arrow. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he took his daughter's small hands in his. "You know, Sophia, sometimes people aren't who we think they are. But the important thing is that now we know the truth and we're going to be okay, I promise. Are we going home?" she asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. Edward hesitated, remembering Beatrice's advice. "Actually, I was thinking of us taking a special trip, just the two of us, to a place with sea, sand, lots of trees and birds. What do you think?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Like, real vacation?" "Exactly. Real vacation. Just you and me, and Aunt Helen," Sophia asked, her voice dropping to a fearful whisper. "She won't live with us anymore, Sophia. She'll never hurt you again. I promise." The girl was silent for a long moment, processing the information. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with cautious hope. "Can I bring my teddy bear, Tobias?" Edward swallowed the lump that formed in his throat, remembering that the bear was at the mansion, probably in Sophia's room. "Of course you can, Princess. I'll ask Sebastian to get him today. And can we eat ice cream every day?" she continued, a mischievous sparkle appearing in her eyes. Edward laughed, feeling a wave of relief as he saw a glimpse of the joyful and playful Sophia he knew. "Ice cream, fruit, whatever you want. This will be the best vacation of your life." As Sophia cheered up, listing all the things she wanted to do during the trip, Edward made a silent promise to himself. From that moment on, his daughter would always be his absolute priority. No business empire, no fortune was worth the smile that now lit up Sophia's face. Outside the room, Dr. Beatrice observed the interaction with an approving smile. The journey to recovery would be long, but the bond between father and daughter, strengthened by adversity, would be the foundation upon which Sophia could rebuild her trust and security. And for Edward, it would be the chance to rediscover what truly mattered in his life. The house on Catalina Island emerged from among the trees like a vision from another world. Built in a contemporary style, with large windows and a structure that harmoniously integrated with the lush vegetation of the coastal forest, it offered a stunning view of the sea. The sound of waves breaking on the private beach at the foot of the property created a relaxing soundtrack, so different from the oppressive silence that had dominated the Kensington mansion. "Wow," Sophia exclaimed, her nose pressed against the car window, as they drove up the private road leading to the house. "It looks like a castle in the forest." Edward smiled, relieved to see his daughter's enthusiasm. The trip from Los Angeles to the Southern California coast had been carefully planned. Instead of using his private helicopter, which would be faster but also more visible, they opted for a discreet convoy, 2 ordinary cars without the Mendoza Company logos, with drivers trained in defensive techniques. "We've arrived at our refuge," announced Dr. Beatrice, who was traveling with them in the back seat. In the 3 days that had passed since the discovery of the abuse, the psychologist had become a constant and comforting presence, both for Sophia and for Edward. "Is there a beach down there?" Sophia asked, pointing to the blue that could be glimpsed between the trees. "Yes, Princess," Edward confirmed. "Our own private beach. We can go there later if you want." The car stopped in front of the main entrance. Before the driver even opened the door, a middle-aged woman with grey hair tied in a simple bun and a welcoming smile appeared on the porch. "Welcome," she greeted. "I'm Mrs. Connie, the housekeeper. Everything is prepared for you." Edward had been informed by Kyle that Mrs. Connie was completely trustworthy, the widow of the lawyer's former personal security guard. She had been caring for the property for over a decade and was unaware of the true identity of the new guests. To her, they were just friends of Kyle's who needed a discreet retreat. Sophia, initially shy, hid behind her father as they entered the house. The interior was spacious and welcoming, decorated with light wood furniture and shades of blue and green that reflected the outdoor landscape. Large windows allowed natural light to flood all the rooms. "How about we see your room?" Edward suggested, noticing the fatigue on his daughter's face after the long journey. Sophia nodded, holding her father's hand firmly and her inseparable teddy bear Tobias, which Sebastian had rescued from the mansion. The room destined for her was a surprise Edward had planned by phone, decorated with fluorescent stars on the ceiling, a canopy bed in navy blue tones, and shells carefully arranged on the shelves. "It's like the bottom of the sea," Sophia exclaimed, her eyes shining for the first time in weeks. "There's a surprise in the closet," Mrs. Connie indicated, who had accompanied them. Sophia opened the doors of the built-in closet and found a variety of new clothes, light dresses, shorts, colorful t-shirts, and even a swimsuit and children's snorkeling gear. "All this is for me?" she asked, incredulous. "All yours," Edward confirmed. "We need to be prepared for our beach adventures, don't we?" While Sophia explored the novelties, Edward and Beatrice moved away to talk. "She's adapting well," the psychologist commented. "Children have an incredible capacity for resilience when they feel safe." "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Edward asked, concern evident in his voice. "Sometimes I wonder if we shouldn't have stayed in Los Angeles, faced everything head-on." "Temporary isolation is not an escape, Edward," Beatrice assured him. "It's protection. Sophia needs this time to recover, away from police interrogations and the pressure of a legal process. And you also need this time to reconnect with her." Edward nodded, observing his daughter, who was now trying on a straw hat in front of the mirror. "I received news from Kyle this morning," he commented in a low voice. "The FBI has opened a formal investigation against Helen, or rather Katerina. It seems she's part of an international network specializing in high-value marital fraud. The car recordings were crucial. And is there any lead on her whereabouts?" "Nothing concrete yet. They suspect she may have left the country, probably with false documents. Apparently this isn't her first disappearance." The conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Connie, who announced that lunch was served. On the spacious terrace overlooking the sea, a table had been prepared with typical coastal dishes: fresh grilled fish, fish stew, coconut rice, and a colorful tropical salad. "Wow," Sophia exclaimed when she saw the table. "Can we eat out here every day?" "Of course," Edward replied, happy to see his daughter's appetite returning. Following medical advice, they maintained regular and nutritious meals to reverse the malnutrition. Lunch passed peacefully, with Sophia gradually opening up, asking questions about the birds that visited the garden and the fish they might find on the beach. It was as if, away from the oppressive environment of the mansion, she was slowly regaining her curious and talkative nature. After dessert, a delicious passion fruit pudding that made Sophia ask for a second helping. Beatrice suggested a light therapy session through play. In the spacious living room, they set up a space with drawing materials, Play-Doh, and various toys. "Sophia, how about we draw something that makes us happy today?" the psychologist suggested, sitting on the rug beside the girl. Edward watched from a nearby armchair, following Beatrice's guidance to participate in the activities without interfering too much. Sophia began to draw with concentration, her tongue caught between her teeth in a gesture that reminded Edward so much of Marianne that he felt a pang in his chest. "Done," she announced after a few minutes, holding up the drawing. On the colorful sheet, Sophia had portrayed 3 figures, herself in the center, holding hands with Edward on one side and a female figure with brown hair on the other. "Who is this?" Beatrice asked softly, pointing to the woman. "It's Mommy," Sophia replied in a low voice. "I know she's not really here, but Dr. Beatrice said we can keep the people we love in our hearts, even when they go to heaven." Edward felt tears welling up in his eyes. In recent years, he had avoided talking much about Marianne, fearing that the memories would be painful for Sophia. Now he realized that this silence, combined with Helen's cruel lies, had created an even greater void. "Your mother would be very proud of you, you know," he said, joining them on the rug. "You have her same courage, her same smile." Sophia looked at her father with bright eyes. "Can you tell me more about her?" "Aunt Helen said I couldn't ask because it made you sad." "I was never sad to talk about your mother," Edward assured her, realizing yet another of Helen's manipulations. "What saddened me was seeing her leave, not remembering her. In fact, I have many stories to tell." For the next hour, Edward shared memories of Marianne, how they had met in college, her love for butterflies, her talent for storytelling, her happiness when Sophia was born. The girl absorbed every word, occasionally asking questions or adding fragments of her own memories of her mother. Beatrice observed the interaction with approval. This process of reconnecting with Marianne's healthy memory would be fundamental to decontaminate the psychological damage caused by Helen. The afternoon passed peacefully. After the drawing session, they went down to the private beach via a well-maintained trail through the vegetation. Sophia, initially hesitant about the sea, gradually gained confidence with Edward always by her side, teaching her to float in the calm waters of the sheltered cove. The sun began to set as they returned to the house, Sophia exhausted but visibly happy. After a bath and a light dinner, Edward accompanied her for the bedtime ritual, something he realized with a pang of guilt he had rarely done in recent years. "Daddy?" Sophia called as he was about to leave the room after reading a story. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, Princess, anything. Why didn't Aunt Helen like me?" The question was asked in a whisper, as if she still feared being punished for questioning. Edward sat on the edge of the bed, searching for the right words. Beatrice had advised honesty, but adapted to the understanding of a 7-year-old. "Sophia, the problem was never you, Helen. She's not the person we thought she was. Some people are like actors in a movie. They pretend to be someone they're not because they want something. Helen pretended to like us because she was interested in other things. In your money?" Sophia asked with surprising shrewdness. "I heard her talking on the phone once. She said she would be rich soon." Edward nodded, surprised by his daughter's observation. "Yes, partly that. But the important thing is that we found out the truth in time. And now we're here safe, just the two of us." Sophia seemed to ponder this, hugging her teddy bear. "Is she coming back?" "No, my love. She'll never get close to you again. There are many good people helping us ensure that." The answer seemed to satisfy her. With a yawn, Sophia snuggled under the covers. "Good night, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, more than anything in this world." Edward stayed by her side until she fell asleep, observing her serene face, so different from the frightened and dejected expression of a few days ago. When he finally left the room, he found Beatrice on the porch, contemplating the sea under the moonlight. She asked about Helen, he commented, "Joining the psychologist. And what did you answer?" The truth simplified. That Helen pretended to be someone she wasn't because she wanted something from us. Beatrice nodded in approval. "Perfect. Sophia needs to understand that it wasn't her fault, that there was nothing she could do to earn Helen's love. The rejection wasn't personal but part of a larger scheme. How will she overcome all this?" Edward asked, verbalizing his greatest fear. "First she lost her mother, now she goes through this." "With time, consistent love and therapeutic support," Beatrice replied with conviction. "Sophia is already showing incredible signs of recovery. The structure you are providing here, security, routine, undivided attention, is exactly what she needs." Edward sighed, watching the stars begin to dot the dark sky. "You know, for years I thought I was building a legacy for Sophia through business. I wanted her to have financial security, opportunities that perhaps I didn't have. But now I see that the true legacy is the time we spend together, moments like today on the beach. It's never too late for that discovery." Beatrice smiled gently. Many parents never come to that conclusion. Edward's cell phone vibrated, interrupting the conversation. It was an encrypted message from Kyle, received through the secure app they used for communication. "Important news," Edward read aloud. "FBI arrested Tatiana Volkov, Helen Katerina's accomplice, trying to board a flight to Moscow. She's cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. Revealed details of the scheme and confirmed that Katerina is still in the country, likely hiding somewhere in San Diego. Stay alert, but the news is positive." The net is closing. Edward felt a mix of relief and apprehension. On one hand, the authorities were making progress. On the other, knowing that Helen was still in the country, potentially planning some retaliation, was disturbing. "That's good," Beatrice commented, noticing his concern. "The more collaborators they get, the faster they'll dismantle the entire operation." "Yes, you're right," Edward agreed, putting his phone away. "Sometimes I catch myself thinking about how I didn't notice anything. All the signs were there." "Love, or what we believe to be love, can blind anyone," Beatrice philosophized. "The important thing is that you acted as soon as you discovered the truth. Many, out of pride or fear of scandal, would have hesitated." A soft sound interrupted the conversation. Sophia's room monitor, installed so Edward could hear if she called during the night, picked up a small whimper. Immediately he stood up. "It might just be a dream," Beatrice observed. but perhaps it's good to check. Edward found Sophia agitated, tossing and turning in bed while muttering incomprehensible words. He sat beside her, gently stroking her hair. "It's okay, Princess. Daddy's here," he whispered. Slowly, Sophia calmed down without fully waking. Edward remained there watching over her sleep, determined to be the constant she needed. The road to recovery would be long, but looking at his sleeping daughter, he was absolutely certain that they would make this journey together. Outside, the sea continued its eternal rhythm against the rocks, a reminder that even the fiercest storms eventually pass, leaving the beach washed and renewed, ready for a new dawn. 3 weeks had passed since their arrival on Catalina Island. What began as a temporary refuge had transformed into a true home for Edward and Sophia. Mornings started early, with walks on the beach as the sun rose, followed by breakfast on the porch. Afternoons were filled with swimming, exploring the property's safe trails, playful therapy sessions with Dr. Beatrice, and to Sophia's delight, shallow water diving lessons with a trusted local instructor. Edward watched his daughter run along the water's edge, chasing a seagull, her crystalline laughter echoing across the deserted beach. It was hard to believe that this vibrant, confident child was the same one who, less than a month before, trembled with fear at his touch and rummaged through garbage for food. "The transformation is remarkable, isn't it?" Beatrice commented, sitting beside him on the sand. "Sometimes it feels like everything that happened was just a nightmare," Edward replied, his eyes still on his daughter. "But then I see how she still gets startled by sudden noises, how she checks if there's enough food in the fridge when she thinks no one is looking. Those are scars that will take time to heal completely," the psychologist acknowledged. "But every day here is a step in the right direction." Edward's cell phone vibrated in his shorts pocket. Only 3 people had that number: Kyle, Mark, and Sebastian, and all knew they should only use it for urgent matters. "Excuse me," he said, moving a few steps away to answer. It was Mark, his voice conveying controlled excitement. "We got her, Edward. Katerina was arrested 2 hours ago at a hotel in Santa Barbara. She was preparing to board a yacht bound for Argentina." Edward felt a wave of relief wash over his body. "Are you sure it's her?" "Absolutely. Identification confirmed by fingerprints and facial recognition. She was using a fake identity under the name of Luisa Cardoso, but couldn't fool the FBI's artificial intelligence. The operation was a complete success." "What about the criminal network behind her?" "We're dismantling everything. Tatiana has been collaborating extensively. Apparently she was just a pawn in the scheme and is eager to reduce her sentence. We've already identified 6 other cases similar to yours. Brazilian businessmen with young children who were targeted by the same group over the past 5 years. Edward closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the impact of the news. What happens now? Katerina will face multiple charges: fraud, identity theft, child abuse, conspiracy to kidnap. The list is long. With the evidence we have, especially the car recordings, conviction is practically certain. And what about Sophia? Will she have to testify? Probably not in person. The judge authorized the use of medical and psychological reports, as well as a video-recorded testimony, if you and Dr. Beatrice deem it appropriate. The goal is to protect the girl from further trauma. Edward looked back at his daughter, who was now building a sandcastle with fierce concentration. "When can we go home?" "I recommend 1 more week there just in case. We want to ensure there are absolutely no other accomplices at large. But I can safely say that the worst is over." After hanging up, Edward returned to where Beatrice was sitting. Sophia, seeing him, waved enthusiastically, calling him over to see her creation in the sand. "Look, Daddy, it's our magic castle." Edward smiled, kneeling beside her to admire the elaborate castle. "Hey, it's amazing, Princess. Can we live here forever?" Silly. Sophia laughed. "You can't live in a sandcastle. The seawater will take it away when the tide comes in." "You're right," he agreed, impressed by his daughter's perception of impermanence. "But we can build another one tomorrow, can't we?" "Yes, and every day we make a different one." While Sophia returned to her sand architecture, Edward shared the news with Beatrice in a low voice. "That's a huge relief," the psychologist commented. "Knowing that Helen or Katerina is in custody, we can move forward more confidently with Sophia's treatment without the constant fear of an attempted approach." How do you think I should tell her? Edward asked. With simplicity and reassurance. Explain that Helen did wrong things, and that's why she won't be able to hurt anyone anymore. Reinforce that you are safe, that justice has worked. Not too many details, but with honesty. The rest of the day passed with the lightness that had become characteristic of those weeks on Catalina Island. They had dinner watching the sunset. Sophia telling fantastic stories about mermaids. She imagined living in the bay's crystal-clear waters. After her bath and dressed in her favorite pajamas, adorned with starfish, the girl asked her father to read one more chapter of the adventure book they had started days earlier. When Sophia finally fell asleep, Edward went down to the makeshift office in the house for a video conference with Kyle. On the laptop screen, the lawyer's face showed tiredness but also satisfaction. "How are you both doing?" Kyle asked after the initial greetings. "Surprisingly well," Edward replied. "Sophia is recovering faster than we expected. Beatrice says children have an incredible capacity for healing when they are in a safe and loving environment." "And what about you? How are you coping with all this?" Edward reflected for a moment. "I'm different, re-evaluating priorities. I realize now how absent I was from Sophia's life, even when I wasn't traveling. There was always an important meeting, a contract to review. Life has its ironies," Kyle commented. "Sometimes we need a tremendous shake-up to see what has always been right in front of us." "Exactly. And speaking of which, I've made some important decisions in the last few days." "I'm listening," Kyle said, intrigued. "First, I'm going to completely restructure the management of the hotel chain. I've already spoken with Martha, and we're implementing a new executive board that will take over most of the daily operations. I'll continue as chairman of the board, but with only strategic involvement. I imagine that will free up a lot of your time. That's the goal. The second decision is about where we're going to live. I don't want to go back to the mansion in Kensington. There are too many bad memories there now, especially for Sophia." "Understandable. Do you have any place in mind?" Edward smiled. "Actually, yes. I'd like to buy this house on Catalina Island. Sophia is in love with the place, and so am I. She can attend the international school here on the island, which has an excellent program. I can work remotely when necessary, and only go to Los Angeles for essential meetings." "Quite a change," Kyle observed, "but it makes perfect sense. I can start negotiations with the current owner tomorrow." "Thank you. And there's a third decision." Edward hesitated. "I'm still working on this one, but it involves creating a foundation to help child abuse victims and their families. What happened to Sophia cannot have been in vain. I want to transform this experience into something that can help other children." Kyle nodded, visibly moved. "That's a magnificent idea, Edward. Count on me to legally structure the foundation." The conversation moved on to practical aspects: the progress of Katerina's case, the divorce procedures, the situation of the assets she had tried to divert. By the end of the video conference, Edward felt lighter, as if he was finally regaining control of his life. The next morning, during breakfast, Edward decided it was the right time to share the news with Sophia. "Princess, remember when we talked about Aunt Helen doing wrong things?" Sophia stopped nibbling her toast, suddenly alert. "I remember. I have important news," he continued gently. "The police found Aunt Helen. She was arrested because she hurt you and tried to trick other people too." "Arrested? Like in the movies?" Sophia asked, trying to process the information. "Yes, something like that. This means she won't be able to hurt you or any other child anymore. You are completely safe now." Sophia was silent for a moment, thoughtfully stirring her orange juice. "Will she be in jail forever?" "For a very, very long time," Edward assured her. "And even after that, she'll never be able to get close to us again. There are many people making sure of that." The girl nodded slowly. "So we don't have to hide anymore?" "No, we don't have to hide anymore." Edward smiled, admiring his daughter's perceptiveness. "Actually, I was thinking, would you like to live here? In this house, by the sea?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Live here forever? Really? Really? You could go to a school here on the island, make friends, learn more about diving and all the sea things you've been enjoying so much. What about our house in Los Angeles? We can visit it whenever we want, but I think we could start a new life here. What do you think?" Sophia's face lit up with a smile so pure and genuine that Edward felt his heart overflow with love. "I'd love that, Daddy." Can we get a dog too? Mrs. Connie said a dog would like the beach. Edward laughed. Of course we can get a dog. In fact, I've been thinking about going to the animal shelter here on the island to pick one out. Today? Sophia asked, almost jumping out of her chair with excitement. If Dr. Beatrice agrees, why not? The rest of the day was filled with preparations for the new life that was unfolding. They visited the local animal shelter, where Sophia immediately fell in love with a caramel-colored mixed-breed dog with floppy ears and expressive eyes. She named him Valiant and spent the entire afternoon teaching him to fetch a ball at the water's edge. That evening, after putting Sophia to bed, now with Valiant lying at the foot of the bed as a faithful guardian, Edward allowed himself a moment of reflection on the porch. The stars shone brightly in the island's light pollution-free sky, and the sound of the waves created a comforting melody. I found you contemplative, Beatrice commented, joining him with 2 cups of tea. Exciting day, wasn't it? Edward accepted the cup with gratitude. Transformative day, I'd say. Seeing Sophia so happy with the dog, making plans for school, asking if she can take sailing lessons. It's as if she's finally allowing herself to be a child again. The feeling of security does that, Beatrice explained. When children feel protected and loved, they can turn to exploring the world instead of spending energy trying to defend themselves. Do you think she'll ever fully recover? Beatrice pondered before answering. I believe so, but not in the way you might be thinking. It won't be a forgetting of what happened, but a healthy integration of that experience into her life story. The trauma won't define her, but it will be part of who she is, probably making her more empathetic and resilient in the future. That's a comforting perspective, Edward admitted. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't returned that specific day, if I hadn't gone to the garden. But you did, Beatrice gently interrupted. And that's what matters. The past cannot be rewritten, but the future is entirely in your hands. Our hands, Edward corrected. Without you, Kyle, Mark, Dr. Roderick, and so many others who helped us, we wouldn't be here now. Beatrice smiled. An important lesson this experience teaches us is precisely about genuine human connections. Helen, or Katerina, manipulated people using false ties, but it was the true ties that saved Sophia. Your fatherly love, Sebastian's loyalty, Dr. Roderick's concern, and your professional commitment, Edward added, which became something more, Beatrice admitted. I confess I've grown attached to Sophia in a way that doesn't usually happen with my patients. She has that effect on people, Edward smiled, looking at the horizon where the moonlight created a silver path on the sea. You know, before all this happened, I thought I understood what it meant to be successful. I thought in terms of hotels built, contracts closed, zeros in the bank account. And now I understand that success is seeing my daughter sleeping peacefully, knowing she is safe and loved. It's hearing her laughter as she plays on the beach. It's being present, truly present, in every important moment of her life. They stood in silence for a few minutes, contemplating the stars. The only sound was the waves and occasionally a soft bark from Valiant dreaming. I think I'll accept your offer, Beatrice finally said. What offer? Edward asked, confused. To be a permanent consultant for the foundation you intend to create. I've been thinking about it since you mentioned the idea yesterday. There are so many children like Sophia needing help, and so few resources available. Edward felt a wave of gratitude. It would be an honor to have you with us on this project. In fact, I was waiting for the right moment to formalize the invitation. Consider it accepted then, Beatrice smiled. I think I've finally found a purpose that combines my academic knowledge with something truly transformative. The conversation was interrupted by a soft call from Sophia's room. Immediately, Edward stood up. Even knowing his daughter was safe, his protective instinct was constantly on alert. He found Sophia sitting in bed, hugging Valiant, who was gently licking her face. I had a dream, Daddy. A bad dream? He asked, sitting beside her. To his surprise, Sophia shook her head negatively. No, I dreamed about Mommy. She was sitting on the beach with us and she said she's happy because we're doing well now. Edward felt emotion tighten his throat. That was a very beautiful dream, Princess. She seemed so real, Sophia continued, distractedly stroking Valiant's ears. She was wearing a white dress and had flowers in her hair. She said she'll always take care of us even from afar. And she will, Edward assured, hugging his daughter. Your mother will always be a part of us, in our hearts and in our memories. Sophia yawned, snuggling back under the covers. Can I tell you something, Daddy? Anything. I'm happy. Even after everything that happened with Aunt Helen, even with the sad things, I'm happy now. The simple, profound words touched Edward as no elaborate speech ever could. I'm happy too, my love. Happier than I've been in a very long time. Sophia smiled, her eyes already closing with sleep. Good night, Daddy. I love you to infinity. And I love you beyond infinity, he replied, kissing her forehead. When he returned to the porch, Edward found Beatrice admiring the full moon that bathed the landscape with its silvery light. Is Sophia okay? She asked. Better than okay, he replied, still emotional. She just told me she's happy despite everything. The innocence of children is a powerful force, Beatrice commented. They have an innate ability to find joy even after traumatic experiences, as long as they receive adequate support. That gives me hope for the future. As it should, she agreed. The future is full of possibilities now. In the weeks and months that followed, life on Catalina Island settled into a comforting routine. The house was bought and personalized to reflect the tastes of the new family forming there. Sophia enrolled in the local school, where she quickly made friends and excelled in marine science, an interest fueled by her daily explorations on the beach. Valiant grew strong and protective, accompanying the girl on all her adventures. Edward kept his promise to restructure his businesses, delegating responsibilities and creating space to be genuinely present in his daughter's life. Trips to Los Angeles became rarer and always brief. The New Beginnings Foundation, created in partnership with Beatrice, quickly established itself as a reference in supporting child abuse victims and their families. The case against Katarina Volkov and her accomplices progressed successfully. The evidence was irrefutable, especially with the car recordings and Tatiana's testimony. The trial, discreetly followed by the press, resulted in a 15-year prison sentence for Katarina, with the possibility of extradition to Russia after serving her sentence in the USA. On a Sunday afternoon, almost a year after the events that had changed their lives, Edward and Sophia walked along the beach, watching the sunset. Valiant ran ahead, chasing seagulls that lazily took flight. Daddy, have you ever thought about how life can change so quickly? Sophia asked, her voice carrying a surprising maturity for her recently turned 8 years old. I think about it every day, Edward replied, gently squeezing the small hand that held his. Why? I was remembering how sad it was before when Aunt Helen was home, and now we're here with valiant Mrs. Connie, Aunt Beatrice visiting us every week. Do you regret anything? Sophia pondered for a moment, her eyes reflecting the orange of the twilight sky. No, I think everything happened so we could get here. Like you always say, we can't change the past, but we can choose our future. Edward smiled, marveling at the wisdom emanating from this child who had faced more adversity in a few months than many adults in a lifetime. Do you know what I like most about it here? Sophia continued, pointing to the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip into the sea. What? That we can see tomorrow coming every day. When the sun rises there, she pointed east, it's like every day is a new chance. Edward felt his heart overflowing with emotion. You are absolutely right, Princess. Every day, truly, is a new chance. At that moment, with Sophia safe by his side, the sea gently lapping at their feet, and the sky exploding in colors as night approached, Edward understood that the true journey of recovery, both his and his daughter's, was only just beginning. It wouldn't be an easy path, but it would be walked together, with love, patience, and the certainty that, no matter how dark the night, the sun always rises again, bringing with it the promise of a new beginning. And as the last ray of sun disappeared on the horizon, father and daughter remained hand in hand, silhouettes outlined against the twilight sky, two hearts that had faced the deepest fear and now walked step by step towards the light, the end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope Edward and Sophia's journey has touched your hearts. To follow more emotional stories like this, we've prepared a special playlist that you'll find by clicking the link to the left of your screen. If this narrative stirred emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Leave your like and share with those who also value stories of overcoming adversity and true love. Every day we bring exclusive content that explores the complexity and beauty of human relationships. We look forward to reading your comments and knowing which part of this story touched your soul the most. So until our next emotional journey,